Vice President Mike Pence penned an op-ed in the Washington Post titled, "This time we will not be silent on Iran." In the piece, Mr. Pence blames the Obama administration, saying it failed to show America's solidarity with Iranian protesters back in 2009. It went on to say the previous administration also failed to confront Iran as a leading state sponsor of terrorism.
Since the violence first broke out last week, President Trump has tweeted his support for the anti-regime protesters nearly daily, a stance Vice President Pence calls on other nations to join in his op-ed. Texas Representative Will Hurd joins us now with his take on the protests in Iran. Thanks for coming by, Congressman.
Sure, of course.
So President Trump and his administration have been very outspoken of the protesters in Iran. So that's a stance the Vice President has also taken. He says the Obama administration failed to take back in 2009. What do you make of the Vice President's assessment, and what does it mean for the Iran nuclear deal?
Well, I think the protests happening right now is an indication that the Iran deal was failing, but I think we shouldn't talk about that just yet. Right? I think right now the focus should be on the Iranian people and what they're doing. The fact that these protests are happening, the largest we've seen since 2009, the difference is, though, that these started in some of the rural areas and are growing into the larger cities. We're starting to see security forces in some of these cities joining the protesters. You didn't see that happening in 2009. And right now the Iranian government is trying to crack down and prevent images of what's really going on from getting out of Iran. And that's why it's important for us to amplify the message of the Iranian people and not amplify what President Rouhani, the president of Iran, is saying or the supreme leader is saying. So that's why I think the fact that the president and the vice president and Secretary Tillerson have been outspoken is important. And that's why I'm glad that folks like y'all are covering this and talking about this, because it's our responsibility in the rest of the world to broadcast into Iran what the Iranians themselves can't broadcast. And there's going to be plenty of time to debate the Iran deal, but right now this is about making sure enough people show the Iranian people we're with them, because if you really want to prevent a nuclear-powered Iran, you got to change the government. And the only people that can change the government are the Iranian people, and that's why they need to see our support.
We know, Congressman, there's a counter-argument. Vlad talked about the president tweeting. We threw up a graphic of all the tweets in support of the protesters. The counter-argument is that feeds into the government's argument that these protesters are being supported, fueled, pushed by outsiders. Is there a danger in being this outspoken?
Whether or not the president did anything, the Iranian government would say that, right? We've seen that every time they try to crank down on protests. We're seeing reports coming out of Iran that the people that have been arrested, there's been hundreds of people arrested, that the Iranian security forces are beating them, torturing them, and trying to get them to confess on television that they are Israeli and Jewish spies, right? That's just absolutely ridiculous. And so that is a play out of the tyrant playbook that is going to always be used, and that shouldn't deter us from speaking out and amplifying the message of the Iranian people. But we need the leaders of Europe, we need the leaders of the UK, France, Germany to speak out and follow President Trump's lead. We need the EU and the UN to follow the lead of Ambassador Nikki Haley and talk about this is about the Iranian people right now. And that's why I think talking about the Iran deal, let's wait to have those debates, but you are seeing a bipartisan support to the Iranian people to exercise their constitutional right. The Iranian Constitution is the oldest constitution in Asia. It was created in 1906, and they have the right to do this. And we got to make sure that when the Iranian government cracks down, that we highlight those for the human rights abuses that they are.
But let me just ask you on the Iran deal. Do you agree with the president that it's a bad deal and you'd like to see it go away?
I do think it's a bad deal. I think it gave the Iranian government billions of dollars. The Iranian government. I spent almost a decade as an undercover officer in the CIA. I chased Iranian nuclear weapons proliferators all across the country. I collected intelligence on their IRGC, which is kind of their special forces. The Iranian government is trying to pursue nuclear weapons. End of story. They are supporting terrorist groups that are attacking our forces and our allies. There's no question about that. And this Iran deal gave them billions of dollars. And we're seeing now that the Iranian government told the Iranian people, it's the U.S., it's the West, it's those sanctions that are keeping you down. Well, we haven't seen that over a couple months, if not over a year, and the Iranian people realize that's a bunch of nonsense, and that's why they're rising up and protesting.
But are they not in compliance with the parameters of the Iran deal? Are they? In other words, the President Obama and the previous administration said if they were to fall out of compliance, then this deal would go away. Are they in compliance or not?
They're not. There's issues around how much heavy water they're allowed to have, and it's beyond that. The Iran deal had nothing to do with some of the missile technology that we're seeing them continuing to support. Oh, and by the way, there's still a thing called Hezbollah and Hamas that are creating opportunities and fighting our troops and our allies. Right? What's going on in Yemen? You know, there's a lot of focus right now on North Korea and the fact that North Korea is is trying to become a nuclear power. But I think the real story over 2018 is, will the proxy war between Iran and Saudi Arabia and our allies like Israel, is that going to turn into a hot war? Iran has the greatest chance of destabilizing the region, and that's why, I think what we need to ultimately do is reestablish a sanctions regime. That's what brought them to the negotiating table. But right now, the first thing we should be doing is supporting the Iranian people.
I want to talk to you about immigration.
Sure.
The area that you're responsible for actually straddles the border, so this is something of interest to you. The president's meeting with GOP leaders later on this morning to talk about immigration, and there's a tweet for everything, of course. So just last week he tweeted, "There can be no DACA without the desperately needed wall." Do you agree with the president that that a DACA deal is not going to be hammered out unless both sides, Republicans and Democrats, can agree on building a wall?
Well, I would say the only way we solve the problem of DACA or Dreamers is we have to have border security as well. First off, these million kids have only known the United States of America as their home. To me, this is a real simple solution. Right? And the good thing is, reasonable people that are having this conversation on how to fix this are not talking about deporting 1 million kids to countries that they don't know. That's not written on the inscription on the bottom of the Statue of Liberty, right? So that's a good point. Yes, the fact it's 2018, we do not have operational control of our border. But in order to do that, we need to have a smart wall. We need to have a smart solution. We have to look at all 2,000 miles of the border at the same time. I've said many times that building a 30-foot high concrete structure from sea to shining sea is the most expensive and least effective way to do border security. But there are some places where some type of physical barrier is valuable. It's not all 2,000 miles. We should be deploying technology. Most people think that we have the latest and greatest technology on the border. We don't. Most of the technology that's deployed is 20, 25 years old. So we need to have a smart border solution. And guess what? My friends on the Democratic side of the aisle, they agree with that. And most Republicans agree too. So I think we can find some compromise to solve this problem for the 1 million kids that have known the United States of America, that have only contributed to our culture, our economy, and prevent this from happening in the future. But our solution needs to be narrow, because when you start adding all this other stuff, you start building coalitions of opposition. We don't need to do that. We need to solve this problem quickly, and if we can solve it this month, that'll be great.